flying objects or unexplained aerial phenomena have long perplexed and captivated mankind. We assumed that these objects were being manipulated by an intelligence greater than man, and we came to refer to these entities as aliens. We have been conditioned by the media to constantly look towards the skies in order to explain the UFO and alien phenomena. We are also taught that if these aliens exist, then they do so in the form of extraterrestrial biological entities. But what if this assumption is actually incorrect? What is the line that separates an alien from being an angel or a demon? Or could the gray alien narrative be just another thing that Hollywood has fooled us with? Childhood's End is a story about demons who masquerade as aliens and perform a peaceful invasion of the earth in order to deceive humanity into giving up their children to these alien benefactors for the promise of utopia. Witnesses have reported seeing both spacecraft appearing objects as well as luminous orbs of light that dance in the sky. Although alien abduction accounts are provided by witness testimony, these witnesses tell a remarkably consistent story concerning what it was they experienced. All of those witnesses saw something that they could not explain. To claim that we can always arrive at the same conclusion as to the origin of these events, in my opinion, is fallacious and more ideological than scientific. The widely accepted but seldom investigated theory that UFOs are visitors from other planets is what is known as extraterrestrial hypothesis, or ETH for short. An alternative theory to explain this exact same phenomenon argues that the beings responsible do not hail from another planet, but a separate dimensional plane of reality. This theory is what is known as interdimensional hypothesis. One of the staples of the extraterrestrial hypothesis is that these alien visitors have come in order to procure mineral samples from the Earth and in order to take genetic samples and tissues from Earthlings. The problem with the extraterrestrial hypothesis starts with how unrealistic this is. In the 1990s scientific paper, 5 Arguments Against the Extraterrestrial Origins of Unidentified Flying Objects, Fillet states that since there were about 5,000 well-documented cases of UFO close encounter over the last 50 years, if we take into account the unreported instances as well as those that would occur outside of the Anglosphere, then that total is probably closer to 100,000 UFO landings. Villet supports his conclusion against the extraterrestrial hypothesis with the 5 following arguments from the paper. Number 1. Unexplained close encounters are far more numerous than required for any physical survey of the Earth. We can reason that if these alien beings came to the Earth for the purpose of collecting specimen, then how many trips would it take to do so? Just farming the planet for minerals and tissues from humans, it would only take a fraction of those trips. And also, for some odd reason, these alien encounters never, or very rarely, seem to ever occur during the day. And why should a race that is capable of faster than light space travel even care what a mere human driving in their sedan would think? Number 2, the humanoid body structure of the alleged aliens is not likely to have originated on another planet, and it is not biologically adapted to space travel. This is an interesting point. Almost all of these reported sightings of alien creatures almost always describe them as bipedal humanoid creatures with human eyes. Jacques points out that most of these humanoid creatures on the Earth were developed according to a very set of environmental calibrations on the planet. Jacques also argues that if we increase the Earth's gravitational field by a mere fraction, humans would need far stronger skeletons, and such a habitat might have prevented bipeds from existing altogether. For example, if our planet consisted of days that spanned 100 hours rather than 24, then life would not be likely to have evolved or existed at all. There's no reason that they should look so close to humans. Anyhow, number 3, the reported behavior in thousands of abduction reports contradicts the hypothesis of genetic or scientific experimentation on humans by an advanced race. The general story that the majority of abductees describe under hypnosis is one of them being held inside of a spherical room while having a medical examination performed upon them. The problem, Jacques argues, is that even using current Earthling technology, is that for a doctor, it is easy to gather blood, sperm, or tissue samples without inducing any form of trauma. Also, if they simply wanted these tissue samples, they could easily procure them in sperm or blood banks. If any form of tissue collection is needed, as is the official story, then there's just simply no reason to subject humans to what was reported they were subjected to. Number 4, the extension of this phenomenon throughout recorded human history demonstrates that UFOs are not contemporary phenomenon. Jacques Vallée pointed out that humans had been visited by sky vessels and airships going all the way back to the 9th century. But in the modern era, they switched to collecting tissues and DNA, and that it was as if they were adapting their form and methods in accordance with our expectations. Number 5, the apparent ability of UFOs to manipulate space and time suggests radically different and richer alternatives. UFOs traverse to the sky, and they are known to dematerialize and then rematerialize moments later, as well as to divide and then fuse their mass with other masses of energy in a manner which should not be possible for a physical, solid object to do. Another interesting observation from Vallée was regarding the time of day pattern in which UFO close encounters occur, this being almost exclusively during the night, in what Vallée calls the nocturnal character. If these supposed aliens are so much more advanced than us, then why can't they remain undetectable in the first place? And why should they even care if some inferior race sees them? If the spiritual, or should I say, non-material theory of UFO activity is correct, or at least partially, it would mean that many of our assumptions about the nature of our cosmic existence have been woefully lacking. It would also lead us to question whether this narrative was seeded in order to lead us away from some other deception. Upon looking at the evidence, even Jacques Vallée concluded that the UFO phenomenon was probably a cover for something else. And it's likely that it's usually something that's more fantastic than whatever the thing they're trying to cover up is, or salacious or whatever. But what could be more fantastic than the UFO theory? Put it in the comments. But this ideological and dogmatic usage of science is all of the rage today. There is a strange nexus that tends to form between scientists and practitioners of the occult. And wherever it seems to form, it seems that the gray aliens are not far behind. Jack Parsons was a rocket scientist who invented the first rocket engine, pioneered multiple forms of rocket fuel, and founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which would later go on to become NASA. The interesting thing is that Jack was a ceremonial magician, an occult author, as well as an acolyte of the famous black magician Aleister Crowley. Jack Parsons met with Aleister Crowley as well as L. Ron Hubbard, and they engaged in large sex magic orgies. Sex magic purports to harness sexual energy created through the climax in order to utilize some sort of intended purpose. Later on, Parsons' participation in these illicit activities would lead to him being fired from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Later on, while handling explosives for another job, Parsons accidentally blew himself up and died at the age of 37. Another interesting story from this strain of research involves the time that Parsons spent with Aleister Crowley within the secret society Ordo Templi Orientis, which was the lodge from which the aforementioned sex magic rituals were practiced from. During one of these rituals, supposedly, Crowley and Parsons were witnessed opening dimensional gates, allegedly by tearing a rift through the empty space in the ether. It was believed by both men that they were creating a gateway to a spiritual plane comprised of non-human intelligences. It was said that Crowley had closed the gate during a previous enactment of this ritual, but when Parsons tried to duplicate the same ritual, he was not experienced enough to perform it properly, and thus he created a gateway that he was unable to close. Some theorize that this gate has remained open since 1946 and has allowed for the unchecked passage of malevolent spirits into the realm of man. Some people would even go as far to suggest that the entire UFO phenomenon was predicated upon this apparent global catastrophe. I'll admit though, blaming thousands of different events on one scarcely footnoted story about summoning demons, it's not even just far-fetched, it's all the way out there. But it's at least an interesting idea, and wait till you see what these supposed entities looked like. It's also true that we did not have hardly any UFO sightings prior to World War II, which ended in 1945. And this supposedly occurred in 1946. So there really were no sightings before that. Something changed. They say it was because we detonated a nuke, but who knows? Before I go down that rabbit hole, let me get back to the actual story. If you're not already familiar with Aleister Crowley, he was believed to be the wickedest man to ever live, and he went by the moniker the Beast 666. And he was also one of the most influential black magicians to ever live. Supposedly, Aleister Crowley perfected the ability to communicate with a spiritual-based entity, which was referred to by the name of Lamb. Not Jesus, the Lamb, L-A-M-B, but Lamb, L-A-M, which actually means the way in Hinduism. The strange thing about this entity was how similar it looked to the descriptions that have been given to extraterrestrials, particularly those that are known as the gray aliens. Reportedly, Crowley had conjured this entity called Lamb while undertaking a magical agenda, which he called the Amalantra workings. The Amalantra working were a series of magical rituals intended to allow communion and even the physical manifestation of entities like Lamb. These beings are said to be able to share a litany of secret knowledge which was pulled from a forbidden arcana never meant for the realm of man. Supposedly, the bit about Jack Parsons summoning Lamb in Area 51 was found in one of their personal diaries. However, I have looked and I have searched for a proper footnote or reference to this, and I am still looking. So it also really kind of contradicts Jacques Vallée's theory that these intelligences are evolving their shape in order to meet our expectations. We don't have answers on this. The only thing that we can really be certain about is the fact that there does seem to be a deception going on, and we need to make peace with what we can and cannot know. There might be a very good explanation for all of these things, but if anything close to what I am suggesting were actually occurring, would we expect that the United States government would be open and transparent about it? Much of the time today, it seems like our government would rather shield us from an unpleasant truth, rather than expecting that we're capable of such mature level thinking. Sadly, I think the current crop of the ruling class that we have would be far more likely to try to figure out how to weaponize or profit from such a scenario. Disclosure would be one of the last things that I would expect. Jacques Vallée felt that the UFO phenomenon was actually a smokescreen intended to pose as a cover story and distract from what might be an even more fantastical story. I was not able to confirm what location Parsons was referring to as Area 51, where the supposed dimensional rift was open. However, the CIA did admit to the existence of a classified U.S. Air Force base called Area 51 through a Freedom of Information Act request in 2013. Any of these events are indeed true, then we would expect the existence of some kind of classified government entity who is in charge of dealing with these spiritual and extraterrestrial threats. Strangely, there have been a lot of reports what Hollywood has come to refer to as the Men in Black. Let's go deeper down the rabbit hole, shall we? Another proponent of the interdimensional hypothesis, John A. Keel, believed that most of what was being reported as alien encounters was actually the work of spirits and demons. One of Keel's most famous books is called The Mothman Prophecies, and it was spun off into a movie that was loosely based upon his book. This starred Richard Gere, and sadly, it was a very poor reproduction of the book. It does get a few things correct, and it's probably worth watching one time. This mind-bending story in question concerns a variety of unexplainable supernatural events which took place in the tiny community of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. This activity consisted of unexplained aerial phenomena, enormous winged humanoid creatures being witnessed in mass, strange clairvoyant dreams, as well as visits and phone calls from highly ominous Men in Black. This book was called The Mothman Prophecies because they also deliver premonitions of tragic events that will happen in the future. Therefore, the presence of these aforementioned winged creatures is often seen as a bad omen. Well, the fantastic and tabloid nature of this story makes it easier to dismiss simply out of cognitive dissonance. Upon a closer investigation, it becomes clear through the sheer number of sightings and reports that this likely goes beyond simply just superstition and the seeking of notoriety. During a 13-month period between 1966 and 67, there were over 100 sightings of these flying men, as well as dozens of police reports that were filed. One of the most famous but terrifying of these sightings occurred on November 15th, 1966, and was witnessed by two couples who were joyriding in a location called the TNT area by the locals. Witnesses claim that they saw a dark humanoid figure with wings and enormous glowing red eyes at the site. They said that the creature was 6 or 7 feet tall and that it was able to spread its wings and simply take off from the ground. The group attempted to retreat down Route 62, but were pursued by this wing-flying creature overhead. The creature was able to easily keep up with the car, and they began gliding closely while scratching and pummeling the roof of the car in an intimidating manner. Even after traveling well over 100 miles per hour, still, the winged creature had no problem keeping pace with the black 1957 Chevy. For some reason, when they reached the edge of town, the creature stopped chasing the car and vanished into the abyss. Although the two couples, Scarberry and Millette, terrified, they decided to report these details to the local sheriff. The story spread to the media and widely became reported as the event that was the basis for much of the Mothman fandom. Between 1966 and 1967, many other motorists reported similar stories of being chased by large winged humanoids that were capable of flying parallel with vehicles on the interstate. Some have even reported that these creatures seem to fly without even flapping their wings. Another notable sight occurred on the night of March 5th, 1967, when a Red Cross bloodmobile that was carrying a large amount of blood that had been collected throughout the day caught one of these creatures' attention. The winged beast flew aggressively close to the speeding vehicle and only retreated when confronted with light from additional vehicles from the oncoming lane appeared. In addition to this attack, another interesting thing that John Keel noticed was that a large number of the women who shared similar stories seemed to have it occur during their monthly menstruation period. This made some wonder if this somehow was a clue into the nature of these creatures. In addition to the Mothman creatures, the Point Pleasant residents also claimed to see many UFOs and unexplained aerial phenomenon, and they claimed that they were often visited by the Men in Black after such a sighting. The name Men in Black was coined by Jonathan Keel. Allegedly, these Men in Black wore immaculately tailored suits and drove classic luxury cars that always appeared to be in mint condition. They also are said to speak and act in a manner that most would describe as non-human. Their movements and voices are very different from most humans, and they have been known to try to drink Jello, as well as to appear as though they do not know how to use a table knife. They are often said to have information about witnesses that they should not possess, information which they have shared with no one else. Some stories even claim that they have been able to tell exactly what coins a person sitting across the room had in their pants pocket, and that they were able to make one of those coins vanish, claiming to the witness that the said coin would never be seen upon this plane again. In addition to the physical sightings and visitations that occurred, many Point Pleasant residents also claimed to have disturbing nightmares that were related to these sightings. Numerous residents from Point Pleasant warned John Keel about an impending disaster on the Ohio River. These warnings turned out to be a premonition of the Silver Bridge collapse disaster, which would occur exactly 13 months after the first initial Mothman sighting. In an interesting coincidence, it seemed that the load-bearing steel pen that was numbered 13 was actually where the structural failure occurred. Some witnesses also claimed that they even saw Mothman-like creatures underneath the bridge before the collapse. A total of 46 lost their lives in the Silver Bridge collapse that day, but afterwards, all of the aforementioned spiritual activity suddenly just went dark. After December 15th, 1967, the reports from Point Pleasant residents all stopped. No more reports of Mothman, UFOs, nor Men in Black. There were at least 100 reports filed between 1966 and 1967, and they all just stopped on one day. So what actually happened in Point Pleasant, and then why did it suddenly stop happening? I am not wise enough to figure this out. We know very intelligent and sober-minded scientists like Jack Vallée that are presenting a highly compelling case that greatly discredits the extraterrestrial hypothesis that we've been spoon-fed by the media. Authors like Jacques Vallée and John Keel and others have been writing about this theory literally for decades. The theory that UFOs and alien encounters are not intergalactic but spiritual or interdimensional in nature has been long held as a fringe or crackpot view until very recently. With recent political events reminding many of the last chapter of the Bible, many have begun to embrace and gravitate closer to some form of the interdimensional hypothesis. Many believe that these alien entities may very well be the same as the fallen angels mentioned in the Book of Enoch. If you're not familiar with that book, I did a video on it, so check it out. When we examine the evidence-based arguments of the aforementioned events, then we can confirm a few things at least with relative certainty. For instance, alien and UFO close encounters involving some form of medical analysis have been occurring in large numbers for quite some time. And the ET explanation of these events has numerous problems. From this conclusion, it's not difficult to deduce that this one-size-fits-all explanation may be a red herring for something else. If our government can't be forthcoming about WMDs in Iraq, then why would we ever expect them to be truthful about UFOs? The legacy media in Hollywood have worked hard to promote the gray alien narrative, but have all but ignored or made fun of the interdimensional hypothesis. We also know that for some reason, these UFOs were not observed prior to World War II. And we also know that these encounters also appear mainly away from crowded cities and mainly at night. So, with your permission, I'm going to go wild with my theories now. Today, many are theorizing that the nature of reality exists within numerous dimensions that persist simultaneously. This model of describing the universe as separate dimensions or layers now has modern science sounding far more similar to the description of reality that was given in books like the ancient Kabbalah. These layers are like dimensions, and it is said that there are other wills and intelligences that exist within these dimensional layers. If we investigate the writings of people like Aleister Crowley, then we will realize that his work was based upon a view of the universe that is similar to what the Jewish Kabbalah describes. The Kabbalistic view of the universe divides existence into 10 Sephiroth, which are further divided into pairs, which are believed to create a dimension collectively. This fifth dimensional view of our universe speculates that there are numerous other intelligences that are inhabiting these other dimensions. Furthermore, they believe that these realities are separated and obscured by something that is called the veil. Many works of magic are geared towards making this veil thinner. Could something like this possibly explain how the rituals that Parsons and Crowley engaged in might have actually caused these gates to form? Now, I'm going to admit, a lot of these ideas are very far-fetched, and they're probably not all correct. But When the ET explanation fails us, then what else are we left to speculate with? These alien encounters were all very real for the people who experienced them, and there is a good quantity of peer-reviewed, vetted data that at least authenticates these people's accounts. This is usually obtained through hypnosis. If we conclude that Jacques Vallée's assertion that the UFO phenomenon is really a deception for something else, then what would this something else that they're trying to hide be? Since we have no real model to draw from, I think we need to be more open-minded and also to investigate ideas without becoming tribal about the theories that we support. If we look at many of the world's most prominent elites, there is a strange strand of occultism that permeates through places like Bohemian Grove, the symbolism of Washington, D.C., as well as many other notable places. All of this fits like a glove with the aforementioned rituals of Aleister Crowley. And while I don't have time to go into all of that now, I would invite you to research this for yourself. I also have a video on elite symbolism if you're interested. Incantations associated with the occult often involve communing with spirits, who might be called demons. The description of the Mothman is strikingly similar to the descriptions that have been given of demons since the Middle Ages. Demons are typically described as being winged humanoids who delight in the torment of men, which is very similar to the Mothman. As far as the Mothman and all the associated activity, I have no idea why it decided to concentrate in Point Pleasant and why it happened for only 13 months. However, 13 is a very notable occult number, especially with certain illuminated groups. Perhaps the Men in Black, as well as the Mothman, are not aliens, but something that came from another dimension that was somehow accidentally allowed into our realm. When you think about the problem of never being able to get to a potentially habitable alien planet, even while going light speed, does it make more sense that these things came from another dimension or they came from a spaceship? You tell me. It might be possible that there are alien visitors in the traditional sense, as well as humans with classified UFO tech, as well as demons that look like aliens, all going on at different times simultaneously. This one-size-fits-all extraterrestrial hypothesis for labeling every single one of these events as such has got to go. What do you guys think about all of these nutty theories? Put it all in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Peace.